mission to clear the way for the bombers so they could blow that fortress all to hell. First, we'd have to down the barrage blimps. Jesus, imagine being a lookout on a blimp. Bad luck, Fritz. Next, we'd have to deal with their anti-aircraft trucks. The assault was already in full swing when we got there. We'd have to deal with all those defenses, then escort our bombers to their target when they arrived. Tall order. But victory here could change the course of the whole damn war, they said. Safe to say, Wilson was less than thrilled.
Hello, warfighters. War is hell. Welcome to the next episode in the series where I'm playing Battlefield 1, but I'm instead talking about the history of World War I to enhance the Battlefield 1 experience. I did want to start off, though, by saying thank you to everybody for also letting me take a week off. I was on a business trip, and I really tried to make some content while I was away. I set up my computer to be able to remote into it. I even brought my Blue Yeti mic with me to try and do some audio, but it didn't turn out too well. Hopefully, the next time I take a business trip, which is in a couple months, I'll kind of have everything all ready to go, so that way I can continue to release some content while I'm gone. So this is another short mission, and it's really getting to me because I'm like waiting to be able to do the video where I talk about the evolution of military aviation throughout World War I. And it's a pretty big topic. One, again, I'm very excited to talk about, but that's not going to be this one. So what I wanted to talk about for this particular video is some of the aviation firsts that involve World War I. Now, the reason why I say involve World War I is because there is a very common misconception that exists that aviation were first used in combat in World War I. That's definitely not true. And so I want to make sure I make clear what did happen for the first time in World War I and what did not by, again, talking about some of the aviation first. There is some really cool stuff in here. Like, for example, we're just going to go ahead and dive right into it. The very first aircraft that was used for military purposes was actually purchased by the United States Army Signal Corps on August 2nd, 1909. They purchased a Wright Model A aircraft. Now, because this was a military organization, the U.S. Army Signal Corps, that makes it the first airplane that's ever used for military purposes. Now, the Americans were actually very willing to experiment with aircraft early on and try to figure out how can they use it on the battlefield. Because not only were they the first country to purchase an aircraft for military purposes, but they were also the first nation to ever take off and land from a ship. Now, this does happen on two separate events. So they take off. The guy's name who pilots the ship is Eugene Burton Ely. And so he takes off from the USS Birmingham. What they did is they put a temporary platform on this cruiser. And on November 14th, 1910, he becomes the first pilot to ever take off from an aircraft. Now, later on January 11th, 1911, they do kind of the same thing to the USS Pennsylvania, which is an armored cruiser, where they put that platform on it, and he goes ahead and he lands on it. So not in the same instance as he take off and land, but in those two events, America basically proves that the concept of an aircraft carrier is definitely legit and can be used. Now, the first time, too, though, that we see aircraft really used in a combat scenario is during the war between Italy and Turkey in 1911. Aircraft were primarily used for reconnaissance purposes, where they would just go ahead and take a picture of the battleground. So that way, you could see where the enemy was, where their lines are. They resupplying it at different locations. And they also performed some of the first bombing raids during the Italian and Turkish War. 1913, you see the Mexican Revolution start to involve aircraft as well, as the first bombing attack against a surface ship takes place on May 10th, 1913. What they did is they took dynamite bombs and just dropped them out of their plane right on some of these gunboats in 1913. And so it's crazy that we have taking off from an aircraft carrier taking off from a naval vessel, landing on a naval vessel. You have bombing on both air and sea, but you haven't had aircraft end up trying to shoot at each other. So this is where we get to it. The first dogfight took place between Dean Evan Lamb and Phil Ratter. Now, there isn't an exact date that I was able to find for this. The closest thing I was able to find is that it took place sometime in November or December 1913. And I wasn't able to find anything to back this up, so take this for what you will. But I think the reason why you don't have a firm date on it is because at the time, they didn't necessarily think it was going to be as revolutionary as it was. Because what they did is they just shot at each other with pistols as they were flying. So you've got one aircraft that's going 65 miles an hour, let's say, and then you have another one going at the other aircraft at 65 miles an hour. You got a combined 130 miles an hour. So trying to hit something at 130 miles an hour, like hitting a static object, is ridiculously difficult. And I mean, this is war. People have shot at each other for quite a long time. And again, they're probably not thinking, well, hey, I'm the first person to ever shoot at another guy in a plane from a plane. But I think that's still pretty cool. Now, the first time, this is where we transition into World War I. This is the first time that we ever see an aircraft intentionally take out another aircraft. There's a Russian pilot by the name of Peter Nesterov, and he's actually somewhat famous at this point because the year prior to this, he was the first person to ever do a loop, and I'm just doing one almost right now. The first person to ever do a loop in an aircraft. And I know that doesn't sound too big, too fancy, or, you know, badass, basically, but he was the first person to do a loop. And he gets this, too, by being the first pilot to take down another aircraft. So he's a Russian, of course, in his airplane, and he sees a Austrian aircraft, which has Baron Friedrich von Rosenthal in it, and a pilot by the name of Franz Molina. I don't know. I'm terrible with pronunciation of names. But basically, so Peter Nesterov sees this aircraft and tries to hit it on the top of the aircraft in the wings with his wheels. Now, he's able to successfully do it. The plane crashes, but unfortunately, he also damaged his plane pretty significantly and crashes himself. So all three pilots end up dying as both planes end up crashing. So not necessarily the coolest, but so that was September 7th, 1914. We advance basically a month, October 5th, 1914, and you see the first pilot, Joseph France and Louis Quenon of France, to take down another aircraft successfully with a machine gun. So this is where you start to see air combat as we kind of know it. April 3rd, 1915, you get the first flying ace. Then you've got August 12th, 1915, the first aerial torpedo attack on a ship where British pilot Charles Edmonds sinks a Turkish supply ship. So that's kind of cool that you see that so early on. But again, not everything took place prior to World War I, or during World War I. There was stuff that happened before. But I'm going to end it right here, so thanks for watching, you guys. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. War is hell, but warfighters, you don't have to worry, because I've got your six.